In 1980, 12 years after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, congressional legislation established the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Site. The site includes various architectures, including a house in which Martin Luther King was given birth, the Ebenezer Baptist Church where Martin Luther King used to serve as a pastor, and the headquarters of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Today, the National Historic Site is not only a famous monument in the city of Vienna, but also a time capsule in which the footprints of Martin Luther King are well preserved. It is reminding us of not forgetting the heritage of the old generation. Originally purchased by King's grandfather, this is the house where Dr. Martin Luther King came to this world on January 15, 1929. By then, it is a world full of inequality and injustice. Facing the strict racial segregation in Atlanta, Dr. Martin Luther King bravely chose not to comply, but to fight against all the discriminations he had witnessed. Armed with his perfect public speaking skills and his great determination of making a change, Martin Luther King became a very influential civil rights activist, leading the Montgomery bus boycott, and later on founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. As a very devout Baptist, his ideology of nonviolence became the bedrock for the coming civil rights movement, which prevented the peaceful demonstrations from turning into riots in the South. Today, even though Martin Luther King has been killed, his ideology lives on in the heart of people in Atlanta, shining as a beacon of freedom and peace.
There's no doubt that Martin Luther King's revolutionary ideology has its origin in his faithful religious belief and Mahatma Gandhi's nonviolence activism. King's ardent belief in God laid the foundation for his perception of who he was, who we are, and how the world should be, constructing individual as well as collective identity, along with the value of love, equality, and freedom, longing and willing to fight for liberation, which calls for a drastic change in the social structure in the United States, a war against Jim Crow, in a way full of determination and faith. Gandhi's nonviolence activism in India also changed the former gradualism into direct action. As a significant leading figure in the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s, King's ideologies brought about the claims against segregation and war. Not only is racial equality what he pursued, but racial harmony and colorblindness is the ultimate goal.
The memory of the civil rights movement is shared by the majority of Americans, especially here in Atlanta. This city is an epicenter of protests against the prejudiced majority, and the fight against segregation began here in the 1940s, time when only 5% of African American people were allowed to vote. Step by step, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and later Southern Christian Leadership Conference were battling to improve the situation. First, black policemen were hired in 1948, segregation in the public transportation was declared unconstitutional in 1959, and finally the election of Maynard Jackson, the first African-American mayor in the Deep South, in 1973. Atlanta has made a long journey through bombings, assassinations, and lynchings to the humane and equal city of today. That's why we decided to choose a monument that celebrates the great victory, represents this city's identity, and passes down the civil rights and ideologies through the generations. All this can be found in the Martin Luther King Jr. Historic Site, a place where people have a chance to get an understanding of life and the work of one of the brightest leaders of the movement.
As a bright symbol of the civil rights movement, the historic site chooses to forge a strong exhorting message for the movement at the expense of neglecting some facts. In late work of King, he devoted much energy not only to promoting equality and freedom of all people in the U.S., but also to transforming U.S. political structure. He wrote, "A nation that exploits a whole people in slavery will have foreign investment and everything else, and will have to use its military might to protect them," which shows King's belief that the nation needs a total change instead of improving existing structure to address its inequality. Also, feats of women as a whole are insufficiently presented in the memorial. For instance, in photos, King are always seen with his male lieutenants, while female activists like Ella Baker and their involvement are largely ignored in the exhibition. Moreover, The desegregation of public schools and the signature trial of Brown vs. Board of Education created tensions between the black teachers as black middle-classmen and the black elites. As the previous feared they may lose their jobs because white teachers may take over their job as a result of desegregation. But their practical concerns and enthusiasms towards desegregation of schools are not addressed in the monument either. As a result, those endeavors are largely developed by the mainstream message.
In the novel, Birmingham, Atlanta was deemed as an exotic country by the black in other segregated areas, known for its peaceful success. Though regarded as a compromise to the dominant white by some black folks, Martin Luther King Jr. historic site helps the formation of discourse of the civil rights movement, thus embodying and shaping a vital part of the collective memory of Atlanta. However, it fails to entail the not all desired outcome of the civil rights movement in Atlanta. Besides, the monument fails to include the blind spots in King's activism such as gender equality. Whether intentional or not, the silence adds to the propagandic feature of the monument, making it more an eulogy of the honored activist.